You are listening to the Shared Security Podcast with Tom Eston and Scott Wright, exploring the trust you put in people, apps, and technology.
Hosted by Scott Wright, the Streetwise security coach, and Tom Eston, penetration tester and ethical hacker. And sponsored by Security Perspectives, your source for tailored security awareness training and assessment solutions. We bring you stories, advice, and tips to help you make better risk decisions because nobody else can make them for you.
Episode 49 for December 16th, 2015. Are you more honest with your search engine than with your family?
Hello and welcome to the Shared Security Podcast, episode number 49 for December 16th, 2015. I'm Scott Wright, here with Tom Eston, the Jedi of social media and other types of security.
Hey, good segue into the Star Wars premiere.
Hey,
this
that
weekend,
just
right?
popped into my head. What do you know?
Everything is Star Wars.
I know.
I'm
We're
seeing
driving
it, like,
around
all
today.
over
All
the
the
place.
radio talk shows are talking about Star Wars. So it's yeah. Well, it's a big day, I guess, for those of us who. I mean, I like Star Wars. I'm not that much of a nut about it,
too.
but yeah, it's kind of fun.
I'll see it in a couple weeks when
Yeah,
it all dies down, right?
that's right. Got to see it on the big screen though before
Oh,
it
yeah.
goes away. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, we're in our 49th episode today, and no
Yeah.
shortage of material to talk about. So why don't we just do a quick run through our agenda?
Yeah, let's do that. So the first topic we're going to bring up is about how Google searches can sometimes reveal people's deepest, darkest secrets.
Ooh. Yeah, I love this one. This will be fun to talk about.
Yeah, this will be interesting. And then we're going to focus and jump focus back to our friends over at Vizio and Samsung, and I'm sure some other vendors that are doing some interesting things with those smart TVs and some maybe new attacks that have come out.
Oh yeah, those poor
some
people that own
doing-
Vizio TVs. I feel sorry for
Yeah,
them.
like myself. And then we're going to talk about something called bad BIOS. And again, kind of going back to the Internet of Things and what your TV may be doing without your knowledge. This is an interesting one. It kind of goes beyond the cameras on TVs and how your TV may be watching you, but now maybe listening to you as well.
Gee, doing things behind your back. Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Used to have nanny cams. Now we're gonna have cams on our Internet of Things to make sure they're not doing things that are bad. But I guess that
We have
doesn't
to-
really work because it'll be no. Never mind.
Yeah, that's crazy to even think of that. My head's gonna explode. And then we'll finish up with some things that everyone really should know about those internet routers, right? Your router that's at your house.
Mhm.
Maybe your cable company gave you that as part of your cable plan, your internet plan, or maybe you went to Best Buy and bought one on your own. We're going to talk about some of the security risks of having those devices.
Yeah, and everybody pretty much has one. So yeah,
Yep,
Very
exactly. And then we'll finish up with just talking about healthcare and the Internet of Things, and something that maybe you haven't heard of yet, or maybe you will hear of definitely next year. Something Facebook is doing called Facebook M.
M like in James Bond. M.
Could be.
Okay, I don't know.
Stay tuned.
Okay, well let's dive right in and see what's going on in Google searches these
Yeah.
days.
Yeah, what's up with these Google searches?
Yeah, they happen many times a day. I hear.
Yeah, that's kind of I find this interesting that that's usually the first thing that most people do, right? So even to answer questions now is I'm always telling my kids, when they ask me a question about something and maybe I don't know the answer,
Yeah.
I'll shoot back at them. So did you Google it?
Did you Google it? Yeah, yeah. Well, it's
Yeah.
funny because when I remember several years ago when I think it was the legislation on piracy was being put to the House or something like that. It was Google. All these sites went dark, right? Or in protest, they went dark for a day, and Google had a black front page, like couldn't do anything on it. But you could refresh the page and it would be a normal Google page. But just in protest of the
I think it was the SOP or something like that. I can't remember what it was called. Anyway, just remember my daughter saying, "But if Google's not working, how are we going to Google things?"
You'll Yahoo things. Or
Yeah, I guess that's right. Yeah,
Bing
but
things.
yeah, I mean, all this to say, it's just sort of an embedded part of our lives. We don't even think about how we're using this stuff,
Right.
and when you do step back and think about what's happening to the things that you type into Google's search bar, it's pretty scary.
It really is. And what happens with those most common phrases that people type? So you remember when you know how you start typing something into Google and you get that drop down that of most common phrases. I found this article, and we'll link this in the show notes, about how those searches are being used against people.
Right. Yeah. And turns out it's in a couple of different ways, right? I mean, there's number one, it's Google themselves and all the search engine companies, that do it for free. They're not doing it for free, right? They're getting paid by the people who buy information about the people who are doing searches and what they're clicking on. And so I think something that a lot of people don't realize is the things that you type into that Google search form are stored forever, and they're correlated with all the other search terms, and not only globally, but amongst all the things that you specifically search for within your browser, right? So from day to day, it's tracking what things you've searched for. And there's a really great quote from my hero Mikko Hyppinen from F-Secure when he did a TED Talk in 2013. He says, "We're brutally honest with search engines. You show me your search engine history and I'll find something incriminating or embarrassing in 5 minutes." And it's true. I mean, we don't think that much about what we're typing in. He says sometimes we're more honest with the search engines than we are with our own families. And if you think about that, it's kind of deep. But what I would suggest is, ask yourself, do you really want to trust the people whose livelihood it is that they're derived from selling information about you to somebody else to know exactly what your most burning questions are every day? So that's the direct part of it, right? How Google and the search engines are tracking and dealing with the search terms, the direct search terms you're typing in. But there's a second level behind this, right? The things that do sort of get tracked or correlated and get sold off to other organizations as what do they call it? Remnants, which is the data that's sort of left over or that doesn't seem that important. But when they gather all that stuff together, they can actually not just directly target you with spooky things, but they can lead you to click on things that'll take you to a landing page that tries to collect more information from you. And maybe it seems at first that it's something worth applying for or putting your information in to get something. But it could be sort of a bait and switch, right? As soon as they've got the information about you, then you become an even bigger target, right?
That's right. Yeah. And you can be put on like what they call like the sucker list, right?
Exactly.
So think of like mortgage scams or, any type of scam really that's kind of perpetuated over the internet. There's malicious people that will use these search terms because they know that suckers, right, are going to type in these phrases, and then they will lead you down a certain path to, like you said, collect information or, go into some phishing scams or anything like that.
Yeah, so it's just something that you should keep in mind when you're entering information into search engines. The thing that it sort of bugs me is that Google, the company that is, taking my search requests, also manages a whole bunch of other services that are free that I might be using, like YouTube and things like that, right? And when they can correlate, your video searches with your web searches with any other things, like if you're a blogger or Blogspot, client, or what other services do they have that you might use? Just about anything, right?
Yeah, anything.
And they can start tying those things together. Then there's really a lot of powerful information there. So I tend to try to do some of these things on different accounts, just so that it's a little harder. Even though I know that they have ways like with the Canvas footprint or fingerprinting, they can kind of tell where you're coming from. You can by your IP address and other specific things about your system that they kind of collect. But in general, at least if you've logged out and you're logging in from another account, it's a little harder for them to correlate all that information about you.
Yeah, and keep in mind your location data as well. So when you're doing searches on the internet, note that the IP address that you're using from your ISP and your cable provider or whoever, that gives gives them a location as well, or at least a general area. And sometimes these IP addresses can, if you've seen on geolocation type sites, they will actually get very specific to your city. Maybe even down to the block that you live on.
Yeah, exactly. And it's funny, in our last episode, I think I made reference to a book I read called Invasion of Privacy. It's just a novel, right? But it was so realistic in some of the scenarios. And there's one where the hero, who's a cybersecurity consultant or pen tester, just like you, he's working on his home Wi-Fi network, and another guy comes along targeting him and basically hijacks his own WPA protected sessions by kicking him off, and then when he comes back on, you can kind of attack that negotiation. So now I'm paranoid, and I use VPN even on my own private WPA hotspot. And when you use a VPN, then you can also mask your IP address. So that can also kind of throw off the guys that are trying to harvest your search queries and other information too.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and the same thing with Tor. We mentioned that in the podcast last time. The software that you can use to make yourself a little more anonymous, right? No guarantees.
Yeah,
there's never any guarantees of anything these days, but that would be another way as well.
Yeah, the onion router. Yeah, so we've talked about that too. Yep. There's lots of ways to deal with this, but it is, I think, becoming a little more of a concern just when you start to see how much data is being correlated across search engines and all kinds of other ways. And we're going to talk about some more of them in a minute.
Yes, definitely something to be aware of.
So how's your Vizio TV working these days, Tom?
It's great, actually. I'm very, very pleased with it. At least the latest version that I have. Quick story on that. I bought the TV at Costco, and luckily Costco has a great return policy, because the first TV I bought, the screen died within like a couple weeks.
Really?
So I took it back, actually got a newer version of the same TV, and now all things are well, except for when I read this article about this new attack with not just Vizio TVs, but any of these smart TVs.
Yeah.
They're doing some crazy stuff.
So what kind of things are they doing?
So, and we've touched upon this, I think, in previous episodes, but there was a new attack that some researchers came out with, specifically to Vizio TVs, and it's called a man-in-the-middle attack. And if you're not familiar with what man-in-the-middle attack is, it's where an attacker basically intercepts your network traffic, and sits in the middle and can decrypt and see everything that's being sent from, say, your TV to maybe a third-party ad provider or to Vizio or some other company. And what they found was, two things. First, Vizio apparently has an opt-out of this tracking that they have, which we talked about before in previous episodes, where they can track your viewing habits. So they have they have a technology that can send off, the TV shows and the things that you're watching. So of course they'll take that data and they will sell it to a third party and so on. What they found was that the security, the SSL standard that they were using allowed for any type of SSL certificate to be accepted. Thereby they can intercept and decrypt all of that traffic, which is a pretty big flaw when you think about it. Defeats the whole point of encryption.
Yeah.
It is really one of those things that, from the beginning, when you develop a system like that, usually that's something that you're going to make sure is working properly from the beginning.
Yeah. And sadly, though, you see it over and over again. I hear it all the time. I'm listening to, the Security Now podcast with Steve Gibson, and it's just constant stories about these kinds of things where vendors try to create their own security for their product without realizing that there's already really good stuff out there for free they could use. It would save them time and it would make it a lot safer. And but time after time, these guys think they're clever and they're going to create some way of hiding the data or doing things securely, when it turns out that pretty much every product that gets developed now is going to get beat on pretty heavily by either bad guys or researchers, right? To try and find holes in them. And, we've talked about this a few times too. You have to treat your product, even if it's a simple little kid's toy, which was, stories recently too, that somebody's going to try to abuse them. So you have to be more responsible with the security of data being sent from your products, and that's, in my view, sort of inexcusable not to use these easily available standard libraries.
Yep. Yeah, and so in addition to that, there was another flaw that was found. So they did another layer of encryption, basically, to encrypt this stream of data that can basically tell Vizio what TV program you're watching. They actually left something called a salt. So a salt is used in an encryption algorithm to add a little bit more security to the encryption, so it's harder to crack. Mm-hmm. They left that salt in a file, a plain text file within the file system of the TV.
Kind of like leaving the key under the doormat.
It's exactly like leaving the key under the doormat. So they were able to decrypt this stream, and I find it fascinating that this stream, and they recreated this, where it's basically binary data that translates into color blocks, which is like a graphical representation of what your screen is showing at that time. And just like how like MP3s, you can find cover art for MP3s because of the certain the cryptographic hash,
yes,
right?
Yeah.
They can do the same thing with TV programs now, just by that little bit of data of what's on the screen through the pixels and through all of that. I find that extremely fascinating, and that really is kind of taking things to a whole other level with, because you try to think about it, like how does someone like Vizio or a third party really going to know what I have on the screen? Now we can figure that out.
Yeah, and I guess it's all on this spectrum of tracking. Is it sort of offensive, or the kind of tracking you wouldn't want to have, or is it going to be used for something to improve your experience? And all the vendors will say, well, it's obviously going to be of some value to the end user at some point, but it's questionable, really, whether they need to do that.
Yeah. So it's interesting. And then, of course, they found out that, you can opt out of all of that by when you set up your TV, there's a yes or no kind of checkbox thing. And they found out that this data is still being sent even if you opt out of Vizio's tracking.
So the checkbox is just kind of a decoration.
Kind of, yeah. It's a pretty big issue. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, it's sad, but we keep the spotlight shining on these guys, and hopefully they'll get it right.
Yeah, you can only hope. But just when you think it was getting better, it gets worse, right? So with this bad BIOS, I don't know if we've talked about bad BIOS in the past.
I don't remember this, actually. I can see from the article that it's been around for a while.
Yeah.
But I don't remember hearing about it.
Yeah, so bad BIOS was it was a piece of malware that was installed at the firmware level of a computer or a device. So something that can't be modified or changed by the user. It basically is installed at the manufacturer level. And bad BIOS would actually interface with your network connection or your network card within your computer. So it became like a permanent piece of malware, which kind of bridges what they call like an air gap, right? So bridging two pieces of hardware or two completely separate types of technology. And it was kind of the first of its kind. Well, now what we're seeing is there's a company, I think it was in India from what the article said, that has developed a technology that through the microphone on a TV and a mobile device, it can actually, through sound waves and ultrasound, figure out what your device is doing. So say, for example, you're watching a particular show the microphone on your mobile phone could interpret what show you're watching just through the sound waves. And all of this could be done silently, right? You potentially won't even know that this is happening, and then you could have ads and things pop up on your phone just based on whatever you're watching on your television through sound waves.
Yeah, that's pretty scary, really. I mean, you certainly wouldn't be thinking about it, especially if it's, sort of in the inaudible range. It's your devices are talking to each other without you knowing it, and without you thinking it's even possible.
Yeah, and this is really kind of a great article. It was on Sophos on naked security, which really does some good research. And they start out talking about the different types of tracking that's out there, right? Cross-device tracking. You know how cookies. Obviously, we all know about cookies and how they track you, but how cookies now are starting to be correlated between devices, right? Because the challenge with marketers is, great, I have all these tracking cookies, but how do I know that's the same person across different devices, across different sites, different browsers? And we're starting to see more of that now as the technology evolves, that these cookies now are becoming, correlated. And then you add in things such as ultrasound tracking with sound waves. I mean, it takes it to a whole new level.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So it's something that's, I think if you're interested in that kind of thing, it'll be very interesting for a while. Otherwise, it's just annoying.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about this a couple of years ago, but leaving your Wi-Fi on your phone, there's actually devices. I think it was the Gap, which is a big clothing retailer. In the malls, they installed Wi-Fi tracking devices in their stores that could record all the different MAC addresses going into their store, so at least they knew if that MAC address came back, right, that would be your phone. They know approximately that these people keep coming back to the store, and they could put some numbers around that.
Yeah. Are there not some devices now that are kind of randomizing their Wi-Fi probes, like their initial request to see if there's Wi-Fi in the area? They try and be a little more obfuscated that way, so it isn't possible to track those things. I thought I heard something about that last year.
Yeah, I believe Apple has implemented a setting that does more of that. For example, it won't try to connect to an unknown access point unless you want it to, or even attempt to beacon out and say, hey, here I am, I want to connect to you. I think depending on the device that you have, I think you can do more of that. But
yeah, and I thought that there was a provision in there where when they do that, it would sort of just send it a random MAC address, because it doesn't need to be used until they actually try to make the full handshake.
Right.
So that's interesting. It'll be interesting to see how that develops. It's sort of another cat and mouse game.
Yep, exactly. So, just another thing to keep in mind, anything that has a microphone. I mean, right now, obviously your mobile device does, your laptops, a lot of TVs obviously have them now, especially with, the voice recognition technology, the new Apple TV, Xboxes all have the technology now where they're listening for commands.
And of course, we're lazy enough that we just want the mics to be on all the time, so we can just say, "Hey, Google,"
Right.
And that's what's going to be our downfall, essentially.
That's when Skynet happens.
Yeah. We're all doomed.
That's right.
What a downer. Okay, so but we're good with our routers, though, right?
Yeah, more bad news. Unfortunately, no. This is just another just kind of an awareness piece, right? That was posted. Internet routers. So just think about the one that you have at home, right? Whether it was provided by your cable company or one that you went out and bought on your own, you've probably had it for a number of years. It's probably sitting there collecting dust, and maybe the only time you've even touched it was when maybe you lost internet access and you've troubleshooting things and you turned it off, turned it back on, unplugged it from the wall. But most of the time, these devices just sit there for years until we see a need to replace it or it breaks. But the problem is that there's vulnerabilities released for these devices all the time, and we don't often think about updating them. And so this article kind of talked about what are some of those issues and the vulnerabilities that are found, and kind of shed some light on. You probably should go ahead and take a look at your router and see if there's any updates.
Yeah, it's pretty funny because, well, first of all, one of my routers is an Apple time capsule. It's an Airport Extreme.
Yeah.
It checks for updates all the time, every time you log into it, basically. So that's good. But there are some I know, and I remember in past, actually, I wrote a blog post probably around 2009 saying you should, every once in a while, check for updates for your router. And one of my security associates said, "Are you nuts? You can't tell users to go and look for updates to their router firmware. That's just crazy." Not that they shouldn't, but it's just like nobody's going to do that, even if you tell them to.
Yeah, exactly. So, it's something to keep in mind. There's lots of different attacks, but essentially if someone gets into your home router, you can imagine they can, literally, either redirect you to malware sites. They can, create different types of attacks to steal your information. I mean, it's just kind of endless.
And they're really pretty powerful, right? They're basically a whole Linux computer in many cases that if you have a vulnerability there, they could basically take over and use it as a spam bot or whatever they want, really. For various types of purposes. And actually, it makes me think of a story I heard a while ago where I think it was might even be mentioned in the article that you reference in our show notes today, where someone had, just out of the good of their own heart, written some, it's like a botnet code or some worm that just goes around finding routers that have vulnerabilities and patching them.
Yeah. So the owner can't get back in, right?
Yeah. No, it's so the bad guys can't
other attackers
exploit it. Yeah. So it's basically there's how many thousands or millions of these routers that the owners don't care anything about. And so this worm just goes around looking for things with, default admin passwords, and it just resets it, and I don't know if it tells the owner or just goes away, but at least it's not vulnerable anymore. And it's kind of an interesting story if you find it on the web.
Yeah, so the bottom line is, especially if you're going out and maybe buying a new router, two things just as advice: change the default password, right? That comes with the router. Always do that. And then secondly, find out if there's any updates for it. And usually, most of these routers have a self-update feature. Goes out to the internet. It will actually see if there's new firmware, download it, and install it.
I think that would depend on how old it is, right? It's only in the last couple of years where they've been doing that. I think older ones don't, so you should check.
Yep, but definitely check. Google your model and see if there's any updates for it. Just something to do.
Good point. Good point.
Yep.
All right. So, what's next? Healthcare.
Yeah, I found this interesting. Internet of Things, obviously, we talk a lot about the consumer market, right? The smartwatches, the smart TVs, things that people are buying. But it's important to also talk about the what's happening in healthcare, and it goes beyond your Apple Watch or your Fitbit, right? There's
more than just your Apple Watch and your Fitbit?
Oh yeah, there is. There's newer technologies coming out now, and in this we have some good examples now of connected refrigerators that monitor your food input and output, right?
Yep.
They go beyond the refrigerators that will tweet you things from a couple of years ago. Now we're actually getting into what are you eating and how are you, how often are you eating certain things from a health perspective. There's now thermostats that will self-adjust to your body heat. So it can sense what your body heat's like in a room and then adjust the room's temperature based on that. We've talked about TVs. But now TVs that can maybe connect into your mobile phone, like to your health application that you're using your Fitbit with, and actually contact your doctor or pop up a message saying that, hey, your heart rate is, through the roof for this period of days. Maybe you think you might be having some heart issues. How about we set up an appointment with your doctor all through your TV? Lots of different examples like that. I found another one in this article, which I thought was kind of unique: light bulbs that will automatically adjust the light to different stress levels that you might have, and the time of day. And they can usually find that out through like something like a Fitbit or another type of health tracking device that you might be wearing. So it's kind of going beyond, again, taking things to another level that is not too far off in the future.
I know it does seem very futuristic. It seems kind of cool in some ways, but for security people, I think it sounds really scary. All these things that are going to be communicating, personal information over the airwaves, especially, and possibly to some mothership for analysis and back. So things to worry about.
Yeah, and I think it's fascinating too. I mean, just thinking of like the holiday season now. I read an article just the other day that smartwatches, like Fitbits and Apple Watches, those are the hottest gadgets right now. People are just buying these things like crazy. So this isn't like a fad, right? This isn't something that's just going to go away.
No. Yeah.
Kind of like some people said, Facebook and social media, it's a fad. Kids are just doing it. It's going to go away. I think we really need to be thinking about this and prepared that this is the future, and we need to embrace it and think about the privacy and security risks of that.
Embrace it and secure it.
That's right. It's a new tagline.
It is. Let's write that down.
Yes.
Cool. And so Facebook's coming up with some new AI technology.
Yes. So apparently this new technology, which is it's being beta tested by some people, it's called Facebook M, and it's apparently going to be implemented into Messenger. And essentially what this allows someone to do is to have more AI type interaction with kind of like Siri or any of this other AI technology that's out there. I found it fascinating that this article, which we'll have in the show notes, is basically called the anti-Turing test, right? So doing things to ensure that it is truly an AI and it's not human assisted. And I found it a little funny that this researcher did some things that led to believe that it's not truly an AI technology, that it may be assisted by humans and may not be fully automated. Big surprise there, right?
Oh, big tragedy too.
Yeah. But it's another one of those things of, making you think of, it's not everything is all that it seems, right?
Yes.
And this may be, and it may end up being a team of people that may sit around there all day answering these questions. So we can't fully, trust that technology is what it says it is. And I just think it'll be fascinating to see how this actually rolls out, because it is going beyond what like something like Siri provides us now. And we're wondering how that will evolve.
I think so. It's, more than just a mobile, sort of a novelty, right? It seems almost like they're aiming for it to be a real kind of personal assistant in some way.
Right. Exactly. So you can imagine little, Facebook M robots in your house, at your dinner table,
controlling your drones,
taking your order and controlling your drones. Hey, did you hear that in the U.S. that if you buy a drone, that you have to register it with the federal government now?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
You mean like even a $30 one? That
I think it has to be under a certain size.
Yeah.
But I think even for hobbyists, I think I'll have to look that up. But they've had too many problems here in the U.S. with drones. They're crashing.
I did hear that actually on Security Now. They were talking about it as a bit of a side discussion. And what was funny was they were talking about drones that are mounted with firearms, right? Or there's one on YouTube with a flamethrower, and
That sounds like a
some other
great
one.
idea.
Yeah, but I mean, it raises the whole. Was it the Second Amendment? Right, the right to
Yes.
for robots to carry arms, right? Is that or for my drone to carry arms? It's really kind of interesting to see how that goes.
See, that truly is Skynet at that point. The computers have definitely taken over once they have firearms.
Yeah. Actually, if you're interested in that kind of thing, I think I might have mentioned it a few episodes ago, but there's a book, a novel by Daniel Suarez, I think his name is.
Yes.
Kill Decision.
Yeah.
And it's basically about autonomous drones that do have firearms on them and what kind of trouble they can get into, those crazy guys.
Yeah, I just want my Amazon Prime drone just to deliver me packages. I think that's a great idea.
Well, in order for it to do it securely, it might have to shoot down, other competing drones. But
Amazon has to arm their own drones to protect itself. That's awesome.
yeah, but that the anti-Turing test itself on that article was interesting in itself.
It's very interesting.
Yeah, good. Well, I think that sort of completes a very robust episode. So we're always interested in having people's comments. You can send us your notes at feedback at sharedsecurity.net. Is that right?
That's right.
And also you can visit our Facebook page, which is?
It's facebook.com/sharedsec.
Yeah. And so we're getting lots of likes there now, so that's nice. And we appreciate those. And any comments, feedback, you can also give on the Facebook page too.
Mm-hmm.
So
exactly.
And we're coming up to our next episode, which is going to be our 50th.
Episode 50. It is going to be a milestone, and I think it'll be good to start the new year off with episode 50.
Yep.
We'll have some special guests, which will surprise our audience with those.
Yes, just a
special
little
guests.
teaser for you.
That's right. We're going to make it an epic episode 50, so we're looking forward to that.
And we thank everybody for being with us all this time, and or at least getting caught up if you haven't been with us the whole time. Go back and listen to some old episodes. The things that we talk about, usually they're things that are in the news recently, but I think our advice and guidance is often very timeless, right?
That's right. This is the message that we've been saying for years, and we continue to kind of spread that message to hopefully a new audience. And
timeless security advice. That's another tagline. What was the one we had? The other one we came up with a minute ago? I can't remember.
Oh, I forgot already.
You're
supposed to write it down.
But we did record it, so we can go back and listen. You mean we have to listen to our own podcast?
Yes, you do.
Oh, well. All right, everybody. Well, thanks very much, and we will talk to you again in the new year.
Thanks for listening.
Bye-bye.